Powerful Solution or Dangerous Illusion? I'm Candace Collins, and I'm representing North America Marketing at Signavio, and I'll be your moderator today. Dr. Kirchmer is an exceptional practitioner and thoughtful leader in the field of digital transformation and business process management. He co-founded BPMD, a consulting company focused on digital process transformation, operational excellence, and customer experience by leveraging the discipline of BPM. Before, he was managing director and global lead at BPM at Accenture and CEO of the Americas and Japan at IDS Shear, known for its ARIS process software. Dr. Kirchmer has led numerous transformations and process improvement initiatives and has worked with hundreds of clients in technology, financial, health, consumer goods, and manufacturing industries. He's published 11 books, over 150 articles. He's affiliated faculty at the University of Pennsylvania and received a Research and Technology Fellowship from the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science. And we're very pleased to have him with us today. So a couple of logistics. You'll see a question box on the right side of your screen. You can enter questions there as we go, and we'll answer as many as we can as time permits at the close of our formal session. And we'll get back to you after the session should we run out of time to answer all your questions. You'll receive a recording of this webinar in just a few days. And once you end your session, you'll receive a short survey, and we'd very much appreciate you taking a minute or two to complete that, as your feedback helps us continually improve our webinars for you. We have an exciting agenda for you today. In the next 40 minutes or so, we'll focus on how value-driven robotic process automation is an approach to address the challenges and realize the identified opportunities when applying RPA. And as I mentioned, we'll have enough time for about 5 or 10 minutes of questions and answers at the end. And our speaker, Dr. Matthias Kirchmer, now has the floor. Thanks, Matthias.
Thank you very much, Candice, for this kind introduction, and hello, everybody. Some time ago, the CIO of a big financial organization told me that her predecessor was very excited about RPA, really pushed that everywhere in the organization, and after a year, they had over 1,000 bots live. Another year later, that created such a chaotic situation that they decided to stop all their bots. And in our webinar now, we will hear a bit about challenges they had and also how we can avoid them. So we will talk briefly about the value of RPA and what it is. We'll then hear how to focus on the right processes, how to improve those in the appropriate context, and how to sustain those results to avoid situations like the one I just explained. Well, while the technology behind RPA has been around for quite a while, the term itself is still relatively new, and it's basically describing a software tool that helps you to work on the user interface of other applications just in the same way a human would do. So it's if you want a transfer of the robotics of manufacturing floors into the office of a service company and the administrative areas of manufacturing companies. And the topic has become very hot in the last years. So almost every organization either uses RPA or at least plans to do so. And that is due to lots of success stories. Of course, everybody has heard about huge impacts of in the field of efficiency, so reduced cost to onboard here a new client in the mortgage industry from days and weeks, reduce that to minutes and hours, save a lot of money through the reduction of manual work. But I have to say that in the last years, more of the qualitative aspects of RPA also coming into the foreground. The fact that you can improve quality, that you can easier scale up, that you can meet compliance requirements, very, very key topics and key motivators for using RPA. Also, not to forget that RPA can really help to have a simpler management approach, especially in the current time. If we have then the possibility here to automate things to ensure our business continuity, to reduce leakage, but doesn't forget anything. All points that make it more efficient and make it a great value proposition to use RPA. However, if you look into practice and look at some statistics, you also see that in spite of this huge potential behind it, there are also quite a few organizations like the one I introduced before who fail with their initiatives, and there exist studies that say that up to 50% of the initial RPA implementations fail, and I would even say the number of implementations that only realize a small amount of the potential of that automation technology is even bigger. And if you look at reasons for such a failure, then we see some of the key ones here on that slide. In the example I mentioned before, that financial organization had huge issues because many of their processes were changing much more often than they had expected, which created tons and tons of exceptions, and they were not prepared to handle that, not prepared to adjust the bots. Then they were able to overcome some bottlenecks, but they had not looked downstream the process. Other bottlenecks popped up, and again, nobody was prepared for that. The issues were much larger than expected, and led at the end to the situation that they stopped the use of this automation technology. And to avoid that, it's important to work in the context. If you automate without knowing your process context, what happens up and downstream, you are in trouble. Also, if you target processes that well, are just not that important for the organization, and even if you have improvements, nobody will realize it, then you will also not come up with the huge benefits. Or if you underestimate the people side of things. Of course, RPA is about automating, doing things without people, but there are more and more than people who have to focus on the handling of exceptions. So they move away from a transactional work and have to deal with more unique situations. That means there is a different requirement for their qualification. They have to work on a different level. They need a different kind of management attention. So change management is also in an RPA environment a very, very big topic. And if you underestimate what happens after going live, how to adjust here the bots to changing processes, how to manage here the new workforce you have to deal with, then you will run into trouble. So all those topics that we see here, these are areas that need to be addressed to get real value out of an RPA implementation. And let's have now a brief look at how to do that. The first important point is to figure out, well, where are the processes where it's worth to have a more holistic automation strategy, including RPA for. And there, research finding helps us a lot. Research finding that shows that an organization only competes with about 15 to 20% of their processes. 15 to 20%. The remaining 80+% are commodity processes that we need to get right, but it's not worth to have sophisticated digitalization and innovation in those areas. So to know where the 15 to 20% are and to get them right, that is what is most important for an organization. And if there are limited resources, limited budgets, those 10–50% of high impact processes, and among those, the ones with a low maturity level, these are the best targets. And to have a clear view on that and to have a different approach to keep the commodity processes on track is very, very key, so that you don't boil the ocean, but move to a focused, high impact transformation approach. Once you know which processes to focus on, then, of course, there is a whole set of criteria where RPA fits, and I don't want to go now through each of those points. That's basically a result of a little research about here the key characteristics of processes where RPA brings a lot of value, and that is of course true for those high impact processes I mentioned. But if you have a commodity process that is performing much worse than it should be in an industry average, then it's of course also worth to check if RPA can make a difference by going through those criteria. However, it's important to know that it doesn't really help to look at RPA in isolation. And you may save 5 minutes of time here, 10 minutes there, but you don't really achieve a significant benefits, and you don't really move your processes to the next level. Therefore, in most of the cases, you look at RPA in the context of other solutions. Like if you need to move your procure to pay process forward, you may look at OCR, optical character recognition, to get here the information from the invoices that come in different formats. You may use some machine learning, so some artificial intelligence, to find where the different information fields are, for example, the addresses. Then you use RPA to enter that information into a transactional application, and you may use a workflow components to loop in people to handle specific exceptions and specific tasks. So automation, if it's really smart, does not just use RPA and goes through the checklist we saw before, but checks also whether the combination with other components really brings significantly more value and moves us to the right performance level. So key message here is that we look on one hand at things from a business side, identify where are the high impact, low maturity processes that we focus on. Then we check if RPA and other technologies can make a difference in this area, so that we identify a process really worth to go through such an initiative. What does that mean, to go through such an initiative in a process context? That means first and foremost, we have to understand that process. And in the example I mentioned, that was the biggest challenge that organization had. They put in those bots on to support individual functions without understanding how those functions fit into the end-to-end process. And as a result, they did not only not get benefits, but they created more issues. And you see here an example for an assist process in holistic description called BPM-D, Business Process Modeling and Notation. And in an analysis, we could show how the different activities would be impacted through our automation strategy, especially here leveraging RPA. So the different symbols show if a function can be fully automated, if it gets eliminated, if there are roles that can get completely eliminated, so that you have an idea how your process would change in the future. And to go a step further, areas where you identify RPA as a potential solution may even need a higher degree of analysis, because then you would check the screen sequences of those tasks to really know what RPA would have to do, and to understand some of the business rules that are often hidden in the different screens and their sequence. So to spend the appropriate time and effort in understanding and targeted analysis of your as-is processes, very, very key for such a real value and outcome-driven RPA implementation. And I know that's a bit a contradiction to all these stories. Oh, we don't need to analyze anymore. We just throw in our automation tools, our bots, and then things will happen on their own. And if the ambition is just to automate one little activity, of course you can do that, but you will not really get the big performance increase. Therefore, it's necessary to understand a process and to have a clear layout where which automation components moves that process forward. And that is then what you would define in an to-be process model that describes how that business process looks like if you use RPA. And the good situation is that once you move into such an automated environment, it's relatively easy and straightforward to get attributes describing the different activities of that process, like time attributes, also cost attributes, so that you can use simulation techniques like a tool like Signavio offers, so that you can identify potential cost and time savings if you move from your as is to your to be situation. So already if you just do very simple exercises like counting the number of tasks here in that example where RPA was used in the context of a digital platform called Uncork at an insurance company, we could show that the number of tasks could almost be cut by half through that automation approach, and that leads to significant savings for just this one product group that would use that new automation approach, and that is then really showing the value you get out of it, and it's in most of the cases really an absolutely necessary input in having a solid business case, in having a solid preparation of your change management, because you can also then generate reports out of these to-be process models that show what are the new tasks for the different roles, what are modified tasks, which tasks go away, so that you have a great basis for your information, communication, and training of people. But you have also the quantitative information that shows the expected savings or scalability improvements that support the investment in this initiative. In many cases, you would then not develop one very comprehensive bot right away that handles as many exceptions as possible. But you develop that bot in an agile approach, starting by handling the happy path, so the 60–70% of standard cases, and then add different exceptions to that, and basically keep on moving that process forward. But that also means that you don't move from your as is to the final to be process, but you move to different process scenarios. I like to refer to them as MVP scenarios to stress that aspect that you use an agile approach, not just to develop the technology, but also to roll it out and to move your business processes forward, and to have there a high visibility and transparency over those different steps and their impact on the organization. That is also very key. In another case, a health insurance company, they were struggling a lot, that after the first rollout of RPA, they were very happy on one hand about it, especially the IT department, because they were in time, in budget, everything was live. But the whole initiative did not really take off, because the feedback from business was very difficult. They said, oh, we spent here a significant amount of money, but we have not gotten faster, we have not reduced cost, we could not redeploy people, so none of the effects are there. We don't trust that stuff anymore. And reason for that was that the expected benefits would come a couple of scenarios later. But since a business only knew about their initial situation and the target scenario here half a year or a year later. They had complete wrong expectations about that first go live, and that led to a negative dynamic. And you can avoid that by having such an MVP-based and agile approach also to your process change management. Another challenge we have seen is rooted in the flexibility and agility of such an RPA and related automation technologies. And well, every technology that can be used in many different ways opens, of course, the doors for doing so, and or improving and changing a process differently in different areas of an organization. So to have an efficient and effective rollout of common practices in an organization, to have standardized processes with all the advantages that this brings, is a very, very big topic in many organizations. And the way of handling that in a very straightforward manner is the use of so-called process reference models. It means in our insurance case that I just mentioned, we defined for one product unit, how do the processes look like in leveraging RPA, leveraging the new digital platform. And then we removed all the product specifics from this process to create a real reference model that could then be leveraged as the basis for the to-be design in every other profits center. And that had huge effects. Of course, the whole design time, all the activities I mentioned before have been reduced by about 50%, and we could make sure that we really manage the standardization of those processes by having here approval procedures in place that make it easy to create process variants in areas that are very product specific, but that make it very difficult in other areas, so that we have a real proactive way managing process standardization using those reference models, something I can really recommend. And with that, we are then in a situation that we understand our process, we understand where we want to move to in the future, and we have a powerful rollout approach, so we can then implement that, go live in the first areas, and then we come to the point I mentioned before, that we need to make sure that we don't underestimate the people side of things. And there's this big buzzword about hybrid workforce management, because suddenly there is a combined team of humans and bots in an organization, and all of those team members need specific and different attention. I explained before here, people who need now to handle lots of sophisticated exceptions. They may need business training. They may need more help and support on a daily basis. But also our bots need to be updated. If processes changes and get adjusted, we need to know what can we do in the business department, and smaller changes of a web page or things like that should really be done in the business department, part of the management of here the digital workforce. Larger changes may then be supported by the IT department, but that whole management process needs to be defined, and that means to move to such a hybrid workforce situation, we need to put the appropriate change management in place, again leveraging our process design so that people really understand how they fit in this picture and how they interact and benefit from their digital colleagues. It's also very important to keep processes on track, that we keep the transparency up, and of course, if we have those process models that I showed available, we have a good starting point, and if they are in a dynamic repository like Signavio, we can keep on updating the content, make sure that we keep on using those models to prepare the decisions, for example, about next automation steps or the next upgrades of our processes. So a solid and active and dynamic management of the process design to get ongoing benefits out of that is a very key point. But on the other hand, we also want to understand how our performance evolves. Do we really get the value out of it? Do we really do what we have designed? And that's the point where this whole topic around process intelligence and process mining comes into the game, and especially in such highly automated processes. That is a very well-suited approach where we see a lot of demand coming up. Also, I have to say the excitement is still higher than the rate of practical implementation, but I see really that field heating up, and when you go through an RPA-based high degree of automation, it's worth looking into such mining approaches so that we get good information about the new performance level. And to make all that happen and to keep processes on track, there's again the people factor that if at the end the decisive factor that you have the right process governance and process management organization in place. Your process owners that really watch the performance, check did we achieve our goals. If not, what do we do to make that happen? Maybe we need to adjust our automation approach. Maybe we need some organizational changes. When do we need to move to the next level? All typical questions and topics that need to be organized, and once we want to move forward, it's good to have the right specialists in place, like a process management center of excellence that helps execute on that. That is here what you see, a very simple example for a very small organization, and they nowadays can also benefit from this automation, and they also need to manage it. They have the process governance in place, but I have to say that in many of the larger, more complex organizations, the definition and setup and rollout of such a process governance approach is a major task, but a major task that really pays off, because those process owners and sponsors and stewards, these are the ones who drive the value realization and make sure that things really happen. So definitively something worth to think about. And that means that the whole RPA implementation becomes part of the larger process management discipline. And that is a last point I want to make here, that it's really, really worth to have an integrated, if you call it now, process management discipline or transformation organization. I don't really care, but to have one umbrella over here the process design and process analysis work, the RPA-based automation, the workflow, and the AI and whatever you have available. So that's it's not a whole set of COEs and everybody fights against everybody to drive their own automation approach in the organization, but that we have a holistic, disciplined view. How do we move our high impact, low maturity processes forward? How do we make sure that on the commodity areas we stay in an industry average? And how do we combine RPA and workflow and other automation components to really make that happen? Therefore, we need an overarching transformation and process management discipline to really realize the full potential of such automation and RPA initiative. And with that, I'm at the end of that little discussion. And here the benefits of such a process-led approach to RPA are pretty straightforward. We discussed all those points. At the end, it's all about not just achieving fast effects, but fast and sustainable benefits, and set the right expectations, and then roll out and scale at pace. And with that, thank you very much for your attention. If you need additional information, I know we just had a few minutes to go through that. We have a whole set of white papers on our webpage here on bpmd.com. You can find all that downloaded for free. There's also one paper around about value-driven RPA, and that has many more examples and tips and tricks than I explained here. So I encourage you to check that out. However, we also have now a bit of time left for questions and answers. Thank you very much.
That's great, Matthias. Thank you so much. The great overview and going into sensible detail about how to proceed, and also having a couple of examples makes it very real. So that's great. We, as I mentioned at the outset, if you do have questions for Matthias, you can put them in the question box. We do have a couple. So why don't I start reading that first one to you, Matthias? Is the process impact analysis only relevant for RPA projects?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And to know what our high impact, low maturity processes are is of course relevant for the management of any organization. If you have a strategy in place, your strategic imperatives, it's important to know what are the 10–15% of the processes that we need to get right in order to make that strategy happen. And that could be then through RPA, through automation, but it could also be through purely organizational measures. We need to know where to focus our process management discipline on, so that we execute on our strategy systematically. And RPA is just one component of doing so.
Makes complete sense. This one, I think you touched on this, but is probably at the key and center of RPA successes or failures. So why do you need to document and analyze a process before using RPA? Isn't that potentially a waste of time?
Also good question, and shows that I have not done that good of a job explaining that before. You see, if you don't understand the process context, then you use RPA to address the automation of simple single issues and single activities. You make the entering of a form from one screen to the next one faster. But you don't really know if that delivers at the end of your process a better result. If it moves your performance to the next level, it's difficult to figure out what to do with exceptions. So you would only realize in the best case a small benefits, and in the worst case you would even create issues, as we have seen in some of the examples. So to understand a process in an end-to-end context and then identify where do we want to use RPA, and then implement that in the context of this end-to-end process, supporting an end-to-end performance result. That helps you to realize the full potential. If you don't have that knowledge around your process, it's just a question of being lucky if you realize significant benefits without creating significant issues. So it helps you to improve the value you get out of it. It helps you to reduce the risk, and at the end, I even predict it will save you a lot of time and effort, because you understand then not only the processes but the screen sequences in a systematic way, and then you have less troubleshooting and error corrections later on. So that idea that you don't need to understand your processes if you use RPA, I think that's just a fairy tale.
It makes complete sense. So the work up front makes a lot of difference. That's wonderful. We have another question. What value does process mining add to an RPA initiative? How are they used together?
Yeah, that's a bit a similar approach like in the first part, or the answer to the first question. If you implement RPA in the context of a process, you want to know then, well, do I really improve the performance of my end-to-end process? You want to know, do the transactions really flow through that process in the way I planned and designed it? You can, of course, do that in a more traditional way by just using your to-be models and then doing some little analysis sessions from time to time. That's something you can get started. However, that is, of course, quite a bit of effort, and normally leads to a situation that sooner or later you stop the regular performance monitoring and performance management. If you use a process mining approach, you will see on an ongoing basis how your transactions flow through your process. You will see how the performance develops, and then you can systematically realize the value. And that is true for an RPA-based automation, but that's also true and especially true for a wider smart automation approach that combines RPA and workflow and OCR and AI. It just helps you to keep the transparency over the process instances that you really execute, and with that gives you the possibility to take well-informed, fast actions if corrections are required.
Wonderful. Related then, so what would you say is the best combination of Signavio and BPMD applications or innovations?
Yeah, it's another nice and good question. Here we have developed for those parts of the approach I showed that are not supported through Signavio or other tools, an BPM-D tool, the DTM, the Digital Transformation Manager, and that's basically a tool to prioritize processes and projects, so to identify in a systematic way your high impact, low maturity processes, and then use that process prioritization as the basis of a project prioritization. And that prioritization approach helps you then to figure out where are the processes that you are focused on, and in order then to analyze those processes and design how you change them so that you meet the new performance goals. That is where then Signavio comes into the game. So you use one tool, the DTM, to identify the high impact, low maturity processes, and then you continue with Signavio to analyze, design those processes, support the implementation of your RPA and other tools, and then support the value realization through the process intelligence and the management of the repository content. So it basically closes that whole cycle from focus, improve, and sustain.
Very helpful. Thanks for that, Matthias. So I think that closes our formal portion. As I mentioned, you'll see a survey when you close. We'd love to hear from you on that. And we'll send the link to this recording to all registrants in the next couple of days. So thanks so much for joining us. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.